G'day guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about who wrote the Song of Songs, so let's get right into it. Now, you rarely hear of anyone preaching through the Song of Songs in church today, and maybe that's because people don't see the relevance of this book in relation to the Christian faith. Now, this particular book, the Song of Songs, is actually a collection of songs, obviously, also known as poems, which are between an unnamed woman and King Solomon. Now, what people don't realise is that the king is actually a picture of the Messiah, and the woman is a picture of the people of Israel, and by extension I mean the church. So therefore, when we read through the Song of Songs, we can actually see that this is a picture of Christ and his bride. Now, this word translated song refers to music that obviously honours the Lord, and it may have been called the Song of Songs because it was the greatest or the most beautiful of Hebrew love poetry. But who really wrote the Song of Songs? Now, as I've been studying this book recently, I've come to realise that there are actually some varying views out there as to whether it was written by a male or a man, King Solomon, or whether it was actually written by a woman. So I want to present to you the different views that I've come across, and I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, so please make sure you do leave me a comment below. So the Song of Songs is often known as the Song of Solomon, and so traditionally it's understood that the book was actually written by King Solomon during his reign as king over Israel, which was between 971 and 931 BC. Now, when we look at the very first verse of the book, which is chapter 1, verse 1, it reads Solomon's Song of Songs. Now, many interpret this to mean that it was written by Solomon. However, it could also be understood as being for or about Solomon. Another supporting verse is in 1 Kings chapter 4 verse 32, where it reads, "He also spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. So some scholars say that perhaps these 1,005 songs, perhaps some of them may have been included in this book, therefore supporting that view that King Solomon wrote the book. Another interesting point to ponder is the mention of flora and fauna of being consistent with Solomon's interest in nature. So in 1 Kings chapter 4 verse 33 we read, "And he spoke of trees from the cedar that is in Lebanon, even to the hyssop that grows on the wall. He spoke also of animals and birds and creeping things and fish." So here we see the idea that this book could have been written by King Solomon because of his interest in nature, flora and fauna. However, even though these passages may support that idea, there are also passages, verses in the book where it mentions King Solomon, as more of the subject rather than the composer. So if we have a look at chapter 3, verse 11, we read, "Go forth and see, O daughters of Zion, King Solomon with the crown with which his mother has crowned him on the day of his wedding and on the day of his gladness of heart." So here we read a passage, a verse where it's really more talking about Solomon. He's the subject, but not necessarily the one who is composing this particular song or verse. So the other view as to who wrote the book is obviously the woman. So many scholars tend to say that this book could have been written by a woman poet. And the reason why they have this particular view is a few reasons. And I want to go through some of these reasons, and, certainly leave me your thoughts and comments below, because I would really love to know. So the first view is that if you've ever read or studied the Song of Songs, you may have noticed that it is actually the woman or the woman's voice that actually dominates the whole book. And when I say that, I mean that the woman actually speaks the most in the whole book. So if you've ever counted all the verses, you would know that there are 117 verses in the book, and out of the 117 verses, 61 and a half times the woman is actually the one who is speaking. And so this leaves the man. So we've actually sat down, Caleb and I have actually sat down and counted as to how many times the man speaks, and this is actually 46 times. So 46 verses out of 117, the man is actually the one talking, compared to 61 and a half as to the woman who's actually speaking. And so that leaves us with about nine and a half verses left. And so basically the nine and a half verses that are left are actually spoken by other people. Another interesting thing to know is that the woman is also the first person who speaks in the book, and she often seems to be the initiator throughout the book, the songs. She's the one who is always like initiating. Another reason why scholars say that this particular book was written by a woman poet, is because some of these songs are so feminine, some of these verses are so feminine that it's really hard to imagine a man writing this. So let me give you some examples. So if we look at chapter 1, verse 2, where it reads, "May he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine." Another example is in Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 16, where it reads, "His mouth is full of sweetness, and he is wholly desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem." So when we read these, couple of verses, it's hard to imagine that, even King Solomon writing these things, his mouth is full of sweetness and he is wholly desirable. So imagine King Solomon writing these things about even himself. It seems very unlikely. Another reason that people say that it's written by a woman poet is the idea that in the Bible, obviously we read that women, compose songs, and those songs are found in the Bible today. So for example, Miriam, after they had crossed the Red Sea, Miriam led the women in dancing and in singing. And you can read about this in Exodus chapter 15. Another example is, of course, Deborah, who was a judge over Israel. And she had a victory song, which was regarding the victory they had over the Canaanites. And you can read about that song in Judges chapter 5. So that's another reason why, scholars tend to say, well, it could have been written by a woman, because we see that kind of thing in the Bible today. So to answer the question as to whether it was written by King Solomon or whether it was written by a woman poet or maybe even somebody else, it's a difficult one to answer. However, personally, I actually lean towards the book being written by King Solomon. However, I would really love to know what you think, so please leave me a comment below, and I would really love to know your thoughts. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe and give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.